Hello and welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Kmet and my co-host is Scott Strasser. Hey, Scott.
Hey, Jason.
How was your Mother's Day today?
Exhausting and expensive. How about yours?
It was lots of visiting, but that's okay. It's good to get together, I guess. And yeah, the day went by pretty quick.
No, ours was good. I was just kind of making fun there. We went to Heritage Park for a Thomas the Train event. My 2-year-old loves trains, so he was very excited for that. And he was, I think, equally excited to take the bus to Heritage Park, which is how we got there today. It was a good morning out. We did Mother's Day with my mom yesterday. So basically, it was a Mother's weekend for me rather than just a Mother's Day. But good times.
Sounds good. Well, let's segue over into the soccer. So this is our weekend recap episode where we talk about the matches that happened with Calgary-based teams over the last couple of days.
Yeah, no Calgary Wild game to talk about this weekend, but we do have Cavalry's opening round game against Pacific FC in the Canadian Championship to discuss. And then there was also a full slate of Alberta Premier League action. Most of those games on Friday with a couple on Saturday as well.
Let's get going. Let's talk about Canadian Championship out on the coast.
This is Dan Klum, and this is the YYC Soccer Podcast.
So a great start to the 2026 Canadian Championship tournament for Cavalry FC as they douse Pacific FC 3-1 at Starlight Stadium. A lot of familiar faces getting in on the goal action. Dan Klomp getting things going. Penalty kick from Tobias Warshevsky toward the end of the game, which put Cavalry in the lead after Pacific had equalized in the 76th minute. And then Michael Baldissimo put the icing on the cake with a stoppage time goal in the 90th minute to put Cavalry into the next round.
Yeah, the Cavs weren't taking any chances in this match when it really came to squad rotation. They pretty much had their regular people out there. Amir Didic returned to the lineup. Harry Payton out with injury, we presume, and Keniji Elva got the start instead. They changed up the formation a little bit in this match, playing with Elva and Toby. I think Klomp moved actually a bit further up in this game, they were saying.
Yeah, that's what I did notice was how high up he was playing. It seemed like he was doing the Beckenbauer role of playing almost like a sweeper, a roaming sweeper who in possession or even when Cavs were in possession would wander up the pitch and be almost like another midfielder. And, he showed some, I think he could be a decent striker, Jason. If you think about the goal that he scored, it was a tidy finish. And for once, it wasn't with his head.
I'm trying to think about how many goals he scored with his feet as opposed to his head. I would say the vast majority are head, but yeah, not too many with his feet, but that was a well-taken ball.
Yeah, it was a decent ball end, but he did really well to get in front of his man and get his left foot on it. And he's not left-footed. So yeah, it was a striker's goal from a bona fide center back. But interesting tactical decision because I did notice in the post-game comments that Tommy Wheeldon Jr. said that was very intentional to basically let Dan Klomp overload the midfield like that and give Cavalry superior numbers. And it definitely worked, right? Like Cavalry pretty much dominated this game. Well,
one thing is that first half, Cavalry seemed to be just toying with Pacific pretty much. They had all the possession. They were just dominating. They only scored one goal. And then that second half, Pacific kind of creeped back into it, but like not really. But I was getting the vibe probably around the 60th minute that, you know what, they could end up tying it up because they're just getting a chance every now and then, and one of those could go in. But here's the thing: the Cavs did a pretty good job of stepping right back up to it and drew the penalty.
Yeah, and as we've seen a few times this year already, I think Tobias Warshevsky slotting it home, although he actually fell down as he took it. So a little bit of luck on that because it wasn't the best penalty. It wasn't that in the corner, and it was a height that goalkeeper would have enjoyed. But yeah, put the Cavs up 2-1 quite late. And then, as mentioned, Baldissimo, it was kind of like a classic stoppage time goal because Pacific was pouring men forward in hopes of getting that equalizer and then left themselves lean at the back, and Cavalry on the counter managed to get him the ball. And he also had a pretty tidy finish for his first goal of the season.
I was wondering, is that his first goal as a Cav? I'm not sure if it was.
I
Might have been.
feel like it's his second, but I can't remember.
You're
It was
right.
against like Valor last year, or maybe
He
Vancouver.
did score a goal last year, now that you mention it. So yeah, the Cavs move on, and now they're going to face the Whitecaps. And I don't know if you've seen on the social media, but it's already getting promoted that, plan for your tickets and everything like that. The first match is going to be on Wednesday, July 8th. We know the date. We're presuming that will be the Cavalry home match, but we don't know that yet for sure.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting because they said first match July 8th, and then the second leg will be on July 12th or 13th. But they didn't specify which team would be hosting first. But there are, as you and I were discussing before we hit record, a couple of reasons to assume that Spruce Meadows will be the July 8th game.
Yeah, the first reason is World Cup's still on, right? So I don't know what the status is of BC Place during that period of time. But yeah, BC Place's availability would be in question. And then the other thing is that date falls in rather tidily into the World Cup schedule.
Yeah, there's round of 16 games in the days immediately before it, and the quarterfinals begin on July 9th. But there's no World Cup games on July 8th, which if it is, regardless of where it is, it does bode well for the attendance. I think regardless, this was going to be a close to sellout game at Spruce Meadows. But I think when you consider the Thomas Müller factor, it's almost certainly going to be a sellout. The only question is, will he play? Considering that I don't believe he's not going to play for Germany at this World Cup. I don't think he's been in Julian Nagelsmann's lineup for a while, but I do believe that he's going to be doing like TV punditry for a network that's broadcasting the World Cup. So that was my only wonder is Thomas Müller even going to be playing against Cavalry in this two-legged affair?
Yeah, well, that'll be a topic of conversation, I'm sure. And I think it would be a very cool thing if he played in that match. Would he be the biggest name to have played at Spruce Meadows thus far in the history of Cavalry?
Oh, absolutely. Like World Cup winner, Champions League winner, won a dozen Bundesliga titles and German Cup titles with Bayern Munich. One of the most recognizable names in soccer in the last 20 years, in my opinion. So easily. I think before that, there were guys with Montreal Impact, as they were known back in 2019. Bakary Sagna, who played for Arsenal. Ali Ahmed, who played for Canada, who plays now for Canada. And Ali Adnan, who played for the Whitecaps in 2019. He was an Iraqi international. But Müller kind of blows all those guys out of the water in terms of international recognition. And it was a huge deal when he went to Vancouver Whitecaps, right? So
I would probably suggest that even though, he's, past his prime and not playing in Germany anymore, he's probably still on the level of fame of current active players, worldwide, he's probably top 20?
Yeah, I honestly think so.
Anyway, that'll be cool, but we have a little bit of time before it happens. But yeah, pretty exciting. We'll be following along with great interest and keeping everyone posted whatever we hear. But I have a feeling that it's going to be one of two things. They're either going to definitively say he's doing World Cup punditry, or it'll be a big mystery until very close before the game.
I remember when Lionel Messi and Luis Suarez and I think Sergio Busquets didn't go to Vancouver for Inter Miami's game against the Whitecaps. Was that last year or the year before?
A couple years ago, I think.
Yeah, and there was all of this flack that occurred because they didn't travel, and all these people in Vancouver bought tickets for that game thinking they were going to see Messi live, and I think the ticketflation thing happened where people were dropping hundreds of dollars, and then they didn't even travel, and people got really upset. But I don't know. Hopefully the clubs can be transparent about the Müller factor this time around, so nobody in Calgary is buying tickets specifically for that reason and then finding out the day of or the day before that he's not even going to come.
Well, I think one thing that happened that really stung the Whitecaps is they really leaned into the whole "these guys are coming" narrative. Yeah. They were advertising and marketing the game as such, and they were charging premium prices, and they were doing all these things, which they were really selling the fact that they were going to be there. Now, I think Cavalry are probably, how prominently would they market or mention Müller in the marketing? I don't know. That would be a question of, what they do there. But I think that was the thing that really got the Whitecaps in trouble was.
Yeah. And And I think for Spruce Meadows and Cavalry, like it's going to be tempting to do that because that's such a draw. But again, you don't want to do that if it's not going to happen, and then you're going to make a bunch of people upset. So hopefully they can learn from the Whitecaps' mistake with the Messi thing.
Well, I don't know. It's just my opinion, at least, is I know would be a Wednesday night match, but it's the Whitecaps. There's no World Cup match that day. The time of year, like it's not early. It's not some kind of like Wednesday night game in April or something like that. The weather should be good. I don't know if Stampede would be on yet, but anyway, I still think that getting a crowd to that match should be, it should be. I would be surprised if it's not a good draw, even without the Muir factor.
Yeah, I think we had a midweek game against the Whitecaps that actually went to penalties back in, I want to say 2022. And I think that drew a decent but not sellout crowd. It was probably around in the upper 4,000s. And it was a nice day, I remember. I remember that game because Meyer Bevins scored a cracking goal from outside the box to tie it up, actually flew into the top corner, but then Cavs lost in the shootout. But yeah, that was probably slightly under 5K, maybe 40, 46, 4,700, that kind of number. But I think this time around, the Whitecaps are, they were last year one of the top teams in MLS, and they do have some big name players even without Miller. So maybe it would be north of 5K this time around.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that over the past few years, Cavalry has grown their fan base. They've won trophies. People just know more who they are, like in the non-hardcore world. So I don't know. I think they've done a pretty good job of just growing their fan base in general.
Hello, Fraser Aird here, guys, and you are listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast.
All right, let's talk about Alberta Premier League action from the weekend. 3 sets of matches on Friday night and then one doubleheader on Saturday. I think one of the matches we talked about in our last episode, which caught our attention, was Cavalry II versus Foothills men, and that was being played Friday night at Slate. And there were a few interesting storylines going into that match.
Yeah, we were keen to see how Fraser Aird would fare in his Foothills APL debut. Obviously, he was a key cog in Cavalry's starting 11 for better part of 3 or 4 years, and now on the outs and not playing professionally, but playing with Foothills. And he did score the winning goal in this one, Jason. It was a 1-0 win for Foothills. Aird with a 75th minute penalty kick. I don't know. I didn't see this game personally, but sounds like I think a decent number of people went to go watch it.
Sounds like it was an entertaining match. Maël Henry played in this one as well. Cavs 2 had a penalty kick, and he attempted it in the 84th minute, but didn't go in.
Yeah, and he'd been subbed in, so he's probably still getting back to fitness. The seemingly perpetually injured Maël Henry. Otherwise, some familiar names lining up for Cavalry. James McGlinchey started and played the full 90, and then Michael Harms also started and played 90.
So let's continue along with the men's matches from Friday night. At Weber, Rangers men played Cali's men, and result was a 1-1 draw.
Yeah, Cali's goal came from former podcast guest Anson Minty, who's now actually with the University of Alberta in the fall season. And then for Rangers, their goal came from Eric Kim, who plays for UBC.
I think this is the first year Eric Kim has played in the Alberta Premier League. I think he might have played in BC last year, but yeah, he's a Calgary lad at UBC.
Yeah, I didn't recognize his name. So, and then the other men's game from Friday night was Villains taking on BTB. It looks like Villains, Jason, they really struggled at this level last year, and they lost a lot of games by very lopsided results, and not off to the strongest start this season. BTB winning this game 4-0.
And then let's talk about the Friday night women's matches. Foothills took on Cavalry II on the men's side, and then they took on Wild U23 on the women's side.
In the Wild U23 Foothills game, this one was 3-1 for the Wild. Goals coming from Ojong Tabit, who got a brace, and then Maya Emberley, who's actually a 2010 born player who played for Blizzard before this.
I think she scored last week too.
Okay, wow. So she'd probably be 15 or maybe 16, depending on what month she's born in.
For Foothills, former podcast guest Avril Jameson, who also plays for Saint FX, notched the lone goal for them.
Yeah, and lots of familiar names for Calgary Wild fans lining up in this one. Sarah Kelty-Dilling played in goal. Sonia O'Neill played. Former podcast guest Anna Hauer played, and so did former podcast guest Naima Ingleton.
I don't think either of those players have played in Alberta Premier League before. I know Anna Hauer played with Foothills when they were in UWS, but I don't think either of those players have really played much in Calgary over the summer, the last couple summers. So I was really surprised to see their name on the game sheet. I will say that Wild roster, there were a lot of people on there, the other people we've been talking about, Clara Monk was the captain, Shaden El Assad, who also made a substitute appearance in the NSL match last week. Yeah, so there were Reese Kincaid, a lot of big names on that team. So even though Foothills is quite a powerhouse, as they usually are, that Wild team, that lineup is pretty impressive.
Yeah, this game in general, like on both teams, had a ton of firepower and talented players, right? On Foothills, Grace Mosala played, Izzy DePalma from the UFC, Jaden Berg. So lots of names that we've gotten used to seeing over the last few years.
Mm-hmm. And BTB defeated Villains 3-1.
So it's same as the Wild versus Foothills game.
The Villains goal was scored by Isabella Chance, who goes to the University of Saskatchewan. And of the BTB goals, there were a couple goals that have a Calgary connection. Tamara Jurasic, who plays for MRU, got 2 of the goals for BTB. I believe she's originally from Edmonton, so she's back there for the summer playing for that.
And other games from Friday night included Rangers versus Callies United. Rangers won 4-1 with goals coming from Katrina McFadden, plays for Mount Royal University, Latifa Benhalem and Sydney Danilshevitz, who also play for MRU, and then Eileen Rayu, who is a UBC Okanagan recruit. And
for the Callies, it's Evangeline Mazza who scored the goal. I think she's graduating this year. I couldn't find her school. So if anyone knows, let me know.
And then there was also a couple of games on Saturday up in St. Albert. Blizzard, fresh off of their debut in the Canadian Championship, their 5-0 loss to CF Montreal. They managed to come out with a 1-0 win over St. Albert. Marco Plenzik scoring the lone.
And on the women's side, this is a big rivalry matchup, St. Albert versus Blizzard on the women's side, and nothing was decided, a 2-2 draw.
Blizzard's 2 goals came from Dr. Rayana Morani and Brooke Batty with the Dinos.
Very often during the League One Alberta Premier League season, there are matches on Tuesday. There are no matches on Tuesday this week. There are matches on Friday, so we'll talk about them in our next episode, which will get released on Friday morning.
Thank you for listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. You can have this episode downloaded to your device as soon as it becomes available by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other platforms. Check our website out at yycsoccer.com, where you can look through our episode archive and find other ways to listen, including our YouTube channel. We also have links to buy my book, Here Come the Cavalry, which is all about the history of professional soccer in Calgary. You can leave a question or comment in the Contact Us section of our website. You can also interact with us on social media through X, Instagram, or Blue Sky, where our username is YYC Soccer 403. Thanks for listening.